Okay, last lap around the track, or coming in from the home stretch, whichever analogy you prefer. The stem, after removing it from the work holding vise on the drill press, I mounted it on the same tapered drill bit that we used to drill the airway with, the same way that I've done to date with like the aircraft bit. So it's locked on there, and then buzzed it up against a polishing wheel, and also you can see the angle that was put on the base of this here. Let me take it off so that I put a shoulder on the outside edge just by touching it up to the edge of a belt sander while it was spinning in the opposite direction. Nothing that you haven't seen several times already. So, and then the inside of that cone was polished with exactly what you'd expect, a Dremel tool with a little felt bob on there and a little polish. So the back half of the stem is 99% finished, and all that's left now is to shape the sides. Basically, the profile from the side is pretty much what we want. It's got a little bit of a duckbill thing going on, which is exactly right. It will straighten out the sides and finish off the button, and that should be it. Now, normally I just leave it at that and then show you the result, but trying to keep in mind there have been some people that say, well, you're glossing over too much stuff. Why don't you show us more of some of the technical things? So I'll do that in this case. First of all, we've got a nice finish on the conical portion of the stem here, so to not risk screwing that up when working on the rest of it, we're going to fall back on our trusty rusty Renfrew hockey tape. And why this makes such a better masking tape than actual true masking tape is because it stretches. And in those cases where you're wrapping it around a cone, that's a big deal, because normally the tape is just going to crawl up barbershop pole style on anywhere that you would put masking tape. It's going to spiral up, where this stuff you can stretch it, and so you'll get a straight coverage around the base of something like that, and it stays tight. So that's now serving as a mask, a sanding mask. And by that I mean you can go ahead and sand it or scuff it, and you'll be able to see immediately when you make contact, because the surface of it turns white long before you've eaten your way through it. It'll tell you, it'll fuzz up and get whitish. And if you ever cut through, you'll know that instantly and can just peel it off and put another piece of tape on there. So it's really handy for this kind of a thing. You've already done this work, don't jeopardize it. And the next piece of information is it's very common for people that begin to shape stems, their instinct is, because stems are long and thin, let's always sand them or grind on them or file them in a long direction. Like we'll just put more pressure on the high spots or something. I'm not quite sure. Actually, that's backwards. The way to get the shape you want when working on a stem, and you want to keep it like a long, like a church warden, where A perfectly ever so gradual taper over a length of 7 or 8 inches is what you want. Or something like this, where we want a perfectly straight line. We're going to take this line of the conical portion, the de facto tenon, and run that line all the way up to the button. And the best way to do that is counterintuitive, which is to sand sideways. And the reason for that is just the way physics works and dwell, that if you start doing this kind of a thing, you just can't control where the material's being removed well enough that you'll end up with something that is wavy over its length. Not like ridiculous, not like a cartoon, but if you put it under light and move it around, you'll see the gleam lines will undulate over its length, where if you go side to side, 90 degrees or very nearly, you have absolute control over where the material's coming off and where it's not coming off, which is just as important. Now, I normally do this kind of sanding with a vacuum horn looking thing to keep from breathing this crap. And it's a good idea for anybody to do that. The younger you are, the more important it is. You get to be my age, I think something else is going to get me first, but breathing the dust of stem making, it can't be good for you, or pipe making in general. Anytime that you're grinding wood, briar is known to be an inflammatory type of sawdust, not as much as rosewood and some of those, but if you breathe it, you'll know it. And there have even been some well-known pipe makers who've had to quit the business because they got respiratory problems from breathing the dust. So you're going to see me do this on these videos without a vacuum running, and don't you do it just because I am. I'm an old guy. It's my prerogative, but if you're a young guy, protect your lungs. There's no rewind button on that kind of stuff. This crap gets down deep inside and does not come out. It'll lead to health trouble later in life. That's your public service announcement for today. So anyway, I'm going to be doing this, and then when I get close to it being finished, I've got a coarse file, I've got these sanding sticks. These things are really handy for early shaping. They're really rough on one side and a little less rough on the other, and you can play games with them. Now I could go over to the bench where I've got sanding discs and stuff and go after it that way, and I might. It depends. It's not really that important what I use to take the largest percentage of the material off with. Now, how I zero in on the final thing is important, and I'll turn the camera back on when I get there. And I'll be using, this is a metal block. It's actually steel and weighs a fair amount, a couple pounds. And I'll explain how to use something like that, why it's better than using the edge of a card or a ruler or something when trying to find straight lines, or follow straight lines rather. So once we get that shaped, we'll shine it up, and other than polishing the funnel on the inside there where that fancy drill bit didn't reach, we'll be good to go. Actually, this crazy drill bit, believe it or not, leaves a shiny finish. It's that sophisticated, and you would think that it would just leave a chewed up looking gnarly finish, but it's anything but. It's actually glassy. You don't even need to polish it. So there you go. I'm going to work for a little bit and turn it back on when we're getting ready to finish up these straight lines. Okay, I moved the camera just a bit so you could see the actual file stroke that I used in this case. We're almost there, not quite. There's still as much material left on this part as the thickness of the tape over here, but you got to get everything squared away before you take the tape off. And I just thought, as long as I've kind of covered some basics in this video set, I'd keep it up to the end here. When you're doing something like this, when I said you want to go side to side, that's true, but you want to go just ever so slightly away from the tape so that I don't know if you can see the motion here, but a kind of a, not just 90 degrees, but a little bit, maybe a 5 or 10 degree angle up like that, so that you don't peel or roll the edge of the tape up, and that you're always pushing slightly away. Like so. And then the thickness you deal with dwell time, meaning where you might use 10 or 15 swipes on the thick part down here, you only need 2 or 3 in the middle and only 1 or 2 at the end. And if you keep that up, you'll be pretty much straight the whole way down. And to check, if you take a block, you can turn the block like so, and it's still as accurate as, boy, I can't see any light at all there. So this is really slick. You can pick these up off the internet for practically nothing, where if you get this kind of a thing, and they're going to bend around on you and drop off one side, and it's more difficult than you think to find a straight edge when you've only got this one whippy thing to go on. It can fool you in lots of ways, where if you have a slab that's milled flat, you just clump it on there and you can see exactly what you need. And if you don't line it up right, it doesn't matter. So, those of you who are into the finer points of making really elegant stems, especially ones with prisms or facets, however you want to phrase it, for like square shanks or hexagonal or octagonal shanks, you got to have one of these. And now, once upon a time, this type of tool came from very expensive instrument houses that cost ridiculous money. Now you can get the Chinese versions of these that are perfectly adequate for this kind of application for very little money. The American ones might measure to 10/1000ths of an inch, and these will only go to about 1/1000th of an inch, but that's plenty good for what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up the rest of this until it's effectively finished, and then turn the camera back on one more time to show you the button procedure. And there's even already a slot in this little guy here. These Maki stems are really, really slick. You just have to remember that the plastic melts at a low temperature, so relatively low, meaning you don't want to crank your buffer up to high speed and stuff like that. I don't mean that they'll melt from smoking or from touching or anything like that. Just in relative terms, you have to be careful of bubbling them. So that's it for the moment, and I'll be back when I've got the sides straight and finished, and we're ready to do the final work on the button, and then we can call it good.